This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups. This is a circus.
I'll point out to you that Justice now, Neil Gorsuch, was nominated by this president. He was considered by this body just last year. I did a rough kind of analysis of similarities. You both attended Georgetown Prep. You both attended very prestigious law schools. You both clerked for Justice Kennedy. You were both circuit judges. You were both nominated to the Supreme Court. You were both questioned about your record. The only difference is that you have been accused of sexual assault. How do you reconcile your statement about a conspiracy against you with the treatment of someone who was before this body not very long ago?
I explained that in my opening statement, Senator. Look at the evidence here, the calendars, look at the witness statements, look at Ms. Kaiser's statement.
Wow. Joining us now, General Counsel and Policy Director for the Judicial Crisis Network, Carrie Severino. The nonprofit has raised significant funds in favor of Kavanaugh's confirmation process. Thank you very much for being on this morning.
Carrie, thanks for being here. If you were watching most of the networks, but even Fox News, it was a tale of two hearings. After Dr. Ford, you had a lot of people, be it Brett Baer or Brit Hume or, of course, Chris Wallace, talking about what a persuasive witness Dr. Ford was. And then after Judge Kavanaugh, they said the same thing. At the end of the day, are you still supportive, and is your group still just as supportive of Judge Kavanaugh as you were at the beginning of the day?
Oh, absolutely. What we saw, obviously, was very compelling and heartfelt testimony from both of them. The experience Dr. Ford describes as awful, but anyone who's outraged about that really should be outraged, particularly at the behavior of the Senate Democrats. That came through several times. Obviously, Senator Feinstein denied being the one who orchestrated the leak of her documents that has put Dr. Ford, Judge Kavanaugh, and really all of us through such a difficult process here. But we know that was in the hands of just a handful of Senate and House Democrats, so that seems to be the source of that leak. That's disgraceful, and it's very discouraging to see. At the end of the day, we still don't have any corroboration of her events. The eyewitnesses she put there say they don't remember this party. Her lifelong friend, even though she's supportive of Dr. Ford, says, I don't think I even know Brett Kavanaugh. I don't think I was ever at a party with him. We ended the day kind of with more questions than we began it in terms of that, because there are a few different details also that shifted, which isn't surprising after 36 years of memory. I think at the end of the day, the senators kind of have one clear choice, and it's, are you going to engage in supporting a vicious campaign on the part of some Democrats, or are you going to vote to confirm one of the most highly qualified and respected judges in the nation?
Hey, Carrie, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you this morning. You said you found Dr. Ford to be a compelling witness. After hearing her testify yesterday, do you believe she suffered a sexual assault?
I think she may well have. I just think the evidence points to the fact that it was not Brett Kavanaugh who was involved.
And do you believe when she says it was 100% when she was pressed that it was Brett Kavanaugh, there was no mistake in her mind? Why don't you believe her on that part of it?
I think she is very confident in her own mind, but we know that with time and with, frankly, some of the same impacts of trauma that she just herself described, it can be hard to be accurate. We all know this, the eyewitness testimony at trials, even from people who are outside and watching from a car crash, can be difficult to trace down. There's a lot of literature on that. So I think we have to look at the outside corroborating evidence. Right. There isn't much contemporaneous evidence, and the people that she points to as being there don't support that story. I think when you have an uncorroborated allegation like this, and that's the only weight you have, it's inappropriate to then take that and destroy a man's reputation that he's built up over so many years of public service. When on his side you have dozens of people who say this isn't anything like the Brett Kavanaugh we knew through high school and the decades thereafter.
So are you in the camp then, Carrie, that it may well have been Brett Kavanaugh, but you need to see more evidence before you decide?
Well, no, I don't think the evidence, all of the evidence points to the fact that it wasn't. So I think it seems more likely there's a
investigation, though, by the FBI, say?
I think it would have been helpful, I suppose, to interview these witnesses beforehand by the FBI when we said that Senator Feinstein received this. That would have unquestionably been the correct result. Hand it to them, just like Senator Biden did. However, the reason we sequester a jury, for example, is so that you don't have them impacted by the media frenzy surrounding a major trial. You have the witnesses outside of the room where they're testifying, for example, in a trial, so that you don't have them affecting and tainting each other's testimony. That's all been blown up now because the Democrats, whether it's Senator Feinstein's office, Chairman Ashley's office, or Congresswoman Ashley's office, we don't know who, they decided to go straight to the media with this instead of taking the proper steps. There's no way to put the genie back in that bottle.
Joyce.
Hey, Carrie, it's Joyce Vance. You've talked a little bit about areas where you would have liked to have had some additional information available, but said that you have a process concern. So why do we have to hew to this 2-day or 1-day deadline when we're looking at someone who will have life tenure on the Supreme Court? Why shouldn't we take the time to have an FBI investigation and get this right, or as right as possible?
This isn't a 1 or 2 day deadline. We've had this for almost 2 weeks now. The Senate Judiciary Committee has been performing an investigation, doing exactly the same types of interviews that the FBI would do. The Senate Democrats have had the opportunity to participate. In some cases, they've even been on the same calls and refused to ask questions out of spite, I suppose, because they keep on saying only the FBI can ask questions. No, senators, this is your job as advice and consent. The confidentiality that the FBI provides, that's not needed now. The same penalties apply as if this investigation were committed under penalty of perjury.
They can
ask the same
Carrie,
questions.
why haven't they talked to Mark Judge yet?
They have. They have spoken to him twice. They've received 2 different statements from him. Again,
reading
under
a letter
penalty
is
of
different
felony.
from getting a statement. Why haven't they gone out and cross-examined him if they can do the same thing that the FBI can do?
The Senate Democrats were welcome to do that. This is a process that's open to both sides. They have boycotted the investigation process, even while claiming in the media they want an investigation. That is very disingenuous.
So they can get a subpoena for Judge and go ahead and talk to him under power of subpoena right now?
I understand. I'm not sure about how the subpoenas work, but I certainly know that all of the people I know they've interviewed Judge Kavanaugh several times. I think they could have, if the Democrats had wanted to, I believe they could have asked to interview Judge as well. But they have simply said, we don't want to participate in this process. Only the FBI can do it. They know that's not true. And if you look at what Senator Biden said back at Justice Thomas's hearings, the FBI doesn't make the credibility judgments that are so important to this. They don't try to decide the weight of the evidence. They simply effectively take testimony. Okay. That's what the Senate Judiciary Committee has been doing all week. The senators now have to decide what to do with that testimony.
Carrie Severino, thank you very much for being on the show this morning.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.